Hey everyone, Davey here, back again to review another episode of The Walking Dead. This time it is for what they call the penultimate episode of Season 5, or in some less fancier words, the second to last episode of the season, entitled Try. And I might keep this review kind of short because right now I am suffering from a little bit of a headache and I'm kind of struggling to get through this video, but I have to do it for you guys, my fans, and also because there's a little bit of a time sensitivity to reviews for TV shows, because as soon as it's the next day and we got another show premiering its episode, then people almost instantly forget. So I gotta talk about this now. Anyways, this is the penultimate episode to Season 5, and man, what a way to build up to the season finale. Not set up, because I feel like there's a difference between setting up things for either the next episode or the next part of even a movie, like the issue that people had with Mockingjay Part 1, or build up where you actually move those things along and have the tension and the drama just escalate to a boiling point, which we saw break at the end of this episode with this particular scene. Man, and I didn't want it to end. I legit, for the first time in a really long time, I didn't want an episode of The Walking Dead to end. I was like, when it would cut to black, I'm like, please don't tell me it's over. I will look at the clock and I'm like, okay, no, we still got a few minutes left, and sure enough, we would cut back from commercial, and I'm like, okay, thank God. But then when I knew that final cut to black was coming, I'm like, shit, it's one more week. And basically what this episode deals with is the fact that the people of Alexandria, specifically Deanna, her family, and people who have been there the longest and know how that town works, are just simply at odds with Rick and his group because of the fact that they come from the outside and they're just different people. They're completely different people, but they have their viewpoints where they justify each other. Both Deanna and Rick have these explanations in their heads that go, no, we are right, no, we are right. And to be honest, here, this is a subject that I just can't find any kind of wrong or right answer. I really don't feel like I can side with either Rick or Deanna, because both of them have, like, when they were having that conversation in what I perceive to be this town's version of a graveyard, I'm trying to figure out who to side with, because Rick has a point about this being a brand new world where you need to decide who lives and who dies almost right there on the spot. But then I want to side with Deanna because this is somewhat of a civilized community. This isn't the woods. This isn't you, as the tagline for the season says, hunt or be hunted. This is an actual little community where you decide to set up a democracy, and because of its democracy, you need to set up some kind of trial. You need to find other ways to solve a problem besides murder, besides what Rick was suggesting. And man, I love stuff like that. That makes you contemplate and think and figure out certain things in life and really tackle very bold themes like this. And to be honest, for me personally, it's been a while since The Walking Dead has done that. And to be more specific, the episode deals with Rick wanting to take care of this guy Pete, who is obviously hitting Jesse and her son, and him trying to put his feelings for Jesse to the side, but also trying to realize that maybe he's going into Shane territory. It's something that I actually didn't really catch on to until this episode, where he had those scenes towards the end where Jesse was kind of looking at him like, hey, dude, I'm married. It's that particular line that made me go, man, Rick really is going into Shane territory. Remember Shane, who was coveting another man's wife and he was going kind of crazy? Rick, even though he's a little late in the game, is starting to reach that point. And it is at the end of this episode where his confrontation with Pete reaches a breaking point to where they start punching each other, and they're out in the street wrestling with each other. Both Rick and Pete hitting people that are trying to break them apart. And being that this is a small community, something like this will attract attention, and there's a bunch of people surrounding them, including both Rick and Deanna's little group. And right there and then I thought this some kind of war was going to break, because at this particular moment, Rick, even though he doesn't kill Pete, he just loses it. In fact, he is telling all of them off. As soon as he pulls that gun out, he's like, back off. I'm like, it's training day. It's training day all over again. This is Rick's King Kong ain't got shit on me moment. And it really was. And man, it just had me going like, wow, is this seriously happening? Is Rick really losing it at this point? Because you saw shades of him losing it in not only in this episode but in the previous one, where he's looking at people enjoying their lives like nothing's ever happened, and he's like, you guys just don't deal with it. And like I stated in last week's review, this is kind of like PTSD for these people. And not only do we see Rick going through that, but we also see some other characters going through it, like Sasha and Michonne. More on them a little bit later, but Rick broke, essentially. And I'm just thinking, man, what more is he going to say? But then out of nowhere, just blam, Michonne knocks him the fuck out. And out of all people, Michonne, although it kind of makes sense. I'm not saying that it came out of left field that Michonne was the one to knock him out. No, it kind of makes sense considering that she's the other constable. So it makes sense that this is one of those cases where a constable needs to take care of another should that person kind of lose it. And it's something that would happen amongst a democracy. And it was just a really perfect way to end the episode and has me looking forward to the next one. But then there's plenty of other stuff to talk about in this episode. I mentioned Sasha and Michonne and how this episode did give them a little bit of material to work with in fleshing out the character and again, driving that sense of PTSD for these characters. Knowing that, hey, these people have it easy and they don't know the horrors that is this new world. And Rick is practically not the only character that has lost it. Sasha is also kind of bonkers in this episode. She is actually going out hunting for walkers, and that's something that only a psychotic person would do in this kind of world. And the moment where both Michonne and Rosita, in regular clothing, Rosita looks almost identical to Tara. So for a moment, I was confusing the two of them. I'm like, I thought she was like in a critical condition, which we actually find out she's stable now. She's good, but it's probably going to be a while before we see her again. Who knows if we're even going to see Tara in the season finale. But anyways, Michonne and Rosita find Sasha out there hunting walkers, and it's clear that she's losing her freaking mind. But in this moment, Michonne also reflects upon her character and how she's also dealing with her form of PTSD. And the best moment with her particular arc in this episode was that moment where with the editing, they got kind of clever, and I actually like that. I like how they cut back between Sasha shooting down these walkers and footage from all the way to season 3 when we first got introduced to Michonne in that in the season 2 finale. In the season 2 finale where Michonne makes her appearance, which was really, really cool. And I liked how they edited all that footage together along with the sound effects of the silenced rifle going off. That was a really good moment for Michonne, and really made her reflect. There's not a whole lot that I can peel back to about the character and go off on it within this video because I want to keep it short. Again, dealing with this headache. But it was a really good character moment for both Michonne and even Sasha. Even though she's still being somewhat reckless and, again, kind of psychotic at this point, I honestly felt a little less frustrated with her in this episode and more sympathetic. Like, I felt more bad for her than I was mad at her because, oh my god, this bitch is gonna get people killed. No, here I was like, okay, I see a little bit more of your pain and your struggle inside. Now, what I perceived to be probably the weakest part of the episode was Carl going off into the woods with his lady friend, whose name escapes me, unfortunately. I honestly cannot remember her name, but she was the character introduced when we barely got into Alexandria, and having that guy say that she's essentially another Carl who came in there just 3 weeks prior to Carl and Rick and the group arriving into Alexandria, and she basically came from a similar background where she was out there in the wilderness with walkers and the apocalypse and had to struggle with things that are certainly very similar to Carl. We don't know the exact details, but we kind of have an idea that they both are cut from the same cloth, essentially. And they had a good moment. That slow-mo shot was kind of endearing. I'm like, oh, it's nice to see Carl have his little moments of childhood that he never had. I'll admit, however, it got a little too sappy where they're literally about to kiss in a tree. You know the saying, you so and so and so and so sitting in a tree. They were literally in a tree. Okay, I was expecting a walker to be like and grab him and inject that moment of peril that walker's about to get him, even though we kind of know that they won't go to. And I guess that's the silver lining to having that sappy moment that they didn't go with the walker scare that oh my god it's gonna get him, but in the end they end up fine. But I gotta be honest, it was just a little bit too much for me, for them to be in the tree and having her whisper to him like, I know you're scared of me too. I'm just like, oh, can we get back to Alexandria? Now, a couple of bullet points before we wrap up. First of all, we knew from the get-go that that little shithead Nicholas, who got away from the revolving door at the end of last week's episode, was going to lie. As soon as he got to Alexandria, he was going to lie about the whole thing and blame it on Glenn. And sure enough, that's what he does during his little interview with Deanna. What I did not expect was actually him being the one who found Rick's gun in the little coffee can back in that little pile of trash near that deserted home. Now, I'm hoping this would actually make sense for the opening of next week's episode, the finale, to be a scene of explaining how Nicholas came about that gun. Because right now, it feels like a little bit of a long shot for, out of all people, Nicholas to be the one with the gun. And surely it's going to bring some trouble in the season finale. I mean, that gun needs to shoot a bullet. Now, in what person is that bullet going to end up into? We'll have to wait and see in the season finale, should it get fired. But more importantly, we got to see more walkers with the W carved in the forehead this time around. Not only out in the wilderness where Daryl and Aaron are exploring what they perceive to be some survivors out there, only to come across this really grisly sight of a woman tied up to a tree with completely disemboweled and eaten. And it's clear that she was actually alive because she was not put down. She comes back to life as a walker by the time Daryl and Aaron get there, and they Daryl, out of the two of them, recognizes that this is actually fresh. Somebody just did this. And did anybody think of True Detective when they came across that site? I'm like, this is some True Detective shit. And only one particular character from the comics could be that out of their mind to do something like that. And from what I can gather, these W's carved on the foreheads of these walkers seems to be pointing at that particular direction. Will we see that reveal in the season finale? To be honest, I think that's what this is setting it up to. It would be completely ludicrous if they don't leave it with a cliffhanger, revealing this particular character and revealing this particular aspect to the show that is being brought in from the comics at the end of next week's episode. So a lot of people thought that last week's episode was one of the best episodes in The Walking Dead, and they gave it rather high ratings. However, I fell in the minority in thinking that episode was really good, but I didn't think it was one of the greatest because, I don't know, I didn't see it that much. This episode, however, I thought was significantly better because it's doing something that penultimate episodes need to do, and that is to get you psyched up for the season finale and not wanting you for an episode of TV to end. And I felt that personally from this week's episode with Rick reaching that boiling point at the end of the episode and really driving a sense of emphasis towards these walkers with the W and particular details that that really paint the image that we're going to have a big reveal at the end of next week's episode, and things in Alexandria are going to explode. And this episode also brought a particular detail to mind for me that people have pointed out before in online articles and reviews for this episode, but I never really saw it all that much until this episode. And that is that, when we came into Alexandria, we were thinking, maybe there's something sinister going on in Alexandria that we don't know about behind this really pearly image. And after this episode, I can honestly say that, yeah, that was true. There was something sinister and possibly evil in Alexandria. And that was probably Rick's group. Rick might just be the bad guys in this particular case. But I think in the season finale, we will maybe have our answer to whose side we should take. And how do we approach this theme about deciding who lives and who dies in the apocalypse. So for that, I give Try a low 9 out of 10. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of this week's episode of The Walking Dead. What are your expectations for the season finale? Do you think there's enough details in the penultimate episode to give you an idea what's going to happen and what's going to be revealed in the season finale? And without spoiling anything from the comic, what do you think is going to be the end result in that finale for Alexandria and the people inside of it? I'll see you guys next time with my review of the season finale for The Walking Dead.